Time now for the election exchange, our special coverage on the state assembly elections. Today, Bengal wrapped up its sixth and final phase of voting, where 25 constituencies in Cooch Behar and East Midnapur's district went to polls. With this, the curtains are finally down as far as the Bengal polls are concerned. The action now shifts to Tamil Nadu, which will go to polls on the 16th of May to select 234 legislators. So will Amma and Didi survive the anti-incumbency wave? Will a rejuvenated CPM Congress alliance dent Mamata Banerjee's fortunes? Or will Stalin's statewide tour revive the DMK? To answer those questions, we are now joined by N Ram, Chairman, Kasturi Sons, the group that runs The Hindu, and political analyst and now Rajya Sabha member Swapan Dasgupta. Let me start this discussion with you, Mr. Dasgupta, because many Bengal commentators are now seeing a genuine social churn happening in the state. Many are calling it the subalternization of Bengal, because while there may be some genuine angst against Mamata among the urban dwellers over issues like corruption and her high-handedness, rural Bengalis are still, at least appears to be, backing her because she's been able to give voice and power to the marginalized, like the Dalits, OBCs and the Adivasis. Do you still feel, sir, that this could be one factor that perhaps is giving Mamata the advantage over the CPM Congress alliance on one hand and the BJP on the other?
Well, you see, if you look at it pure arithmetic terms, the votes polled by Mamata Banerjee in 2014 is almost on par with that polled by the Congress and the CPM in 2014. But remember, at that time, the BJP also polled 16% of the votes. Now, a lot of things have hinged on the ability of the Election Commission to make this a free and fair election. Now, from pure anecdotal evidence, it would seem that these elections have been, by and large, freer and fairer than most other elections have been in the state for a long time. Now, despite that, I would say that as far as the rural areas are concerned, Mamata Banerjee has the upper hand. I wouldn't necessarily attribute this to the subalternization, if that is the word which is to be used. I think that subalternization happened in Bengal a long, long time ago. The voice of those people who are completely marginalized, who are in the poorer sections of society, have always taken a very active role in first voting in the left and then voting out the left. So those things are there. In the case of Cooch Behar, which is today's election, there are certain local issues which are there, which is really got to do with a subterranean demand for statehood, but more a demand for the recognition of the Kantapuri language. And remember, this is also one area where, for various reasons, the BJP doesn't seem to be doing too badly either. So, given all these factors, I would say, on balance, I would say that Mamata Banerjee does enjoy an upper hand in the rural areas. And this has also got to do with the sheer decimation of the CPM from the rural areas, a process which seems to have happened progressively since 2011.
Right. And in fact, we will be talking to you about CPM Congress Alliance and also the chances of the BJP in just a bit. But coming on that then, Mr. N. Ram, and let's just focus a bit on Tamil Nadu. We've just seen Jayalalitha come out with her election manifesto. But the big takeaway, it seems, this time round is the erosion of the Dravidian party's duopoly that they have traditionally enjoyed in the state. What do you feel, sir? Do you think on the ground Vijayakanta's PMK can play an important role in these elections?
I think they will play a reasonably significant role, but it's not the role that you would have thought when the formation got together, when all those parties got together. I think it's still it's still a contest between the two Dravidian movement parties, and it's a tough contest. But they do make a difference, but not, I think, to the extent that was expected when they all came together. That is, the left parties, Vaiko, Vijayakant's party and Vasan's party. It's quite, arithmetically.
Will be the kingmakers then, sir, in Tamil Nadu?
It's possible.
Right.
No, that's
they
not
can
happened
possibly
in Tamil Nadu. So if you go by history, by history, there is no question of a hung assembly. Yeah. So we let's stick to that. Yeah.
All right. Mr. Swapan Dasgupta, let's talk a bit about the CPM. That's what you were mentioning at the end. And the left, especially under the leadership of Sitaram Yechury. Do you see a more rejuvenated CPM now? Because he clearly appears to be bringing in some important changes. In fact, he's even lashed out at Prakash Karat, without quite naming him, of course, saying that in the last decade, CPM has created this environment of sycophancy. And today, the Telegraph has also quoted him as saying that if they do come to power, they will be ending the syndicates. Has all of this has he been able to lift the morale of the party workers? What's your sense, sir?
Well, I think he certainly has. Where Sitaram, what has marked the tenure of Sitaram Yechury as General Secretary, and this is something which Mr. Ram can elaborate even more, is that he is, and at the risk of being unfair, he is occupying the role which the CPI once occupied in relationship with Indira Gandhi's Congress. So he's moved far closer to the Congress. He sees the Congress as a bulwark in the larger battle against Narendra Modi's BJP. So to that extent, for them to actually come together, shed all previous ideological inhibitions and go with the Congress marks a very radical departure from a party, for a party like the CPM. Now, where the CPM is really at a disadvantage, however, in Bengal, is that the almost seemingly impregnable strongholds which they had till 2011 have been eroded quite substantially. So for the CPM, this was a fight for survival. And to that extent, they were quite right in their minds that they had to ally with someone who had a larger national presence, etc., to give them that cover in which they could revive themselves in Bengal. And I think to that extent, they will probably end up this election with a higher tally than they had in 2011.
Would you like to quickly comment on that, Mr. Ram? Because, because as Mr. Dasgupta also said, that you may want to comment on this, because many are interested in the fact that would this alliance with Congress and Bengal have been possible under Prakash Karat? Many see Sitaram Yechury as a pragmatist, a realist. So in that sense, I mean, how do you see this alliance playing out also, in a state like Kerala, where they're clearly, they're at war with each other almost?
I clearly agree with Dasgupta, Swapan, on the question of how they see this as survival. That's how the West Bengal unit or the West Bengal party, CPIM, sees it. But let me remind you that I don't think it's just a question of personalities. The CPIM Central Committee clearly decided that you could not, form any kind of alliance with the Congress. And I think it's not so much the General Secretary or anyone, but the state unit, which I think moved in that direction in seeming defiance of the Central Committee decision, and it's an ongoing process. I listened very carefully to what Swapan said, and I think he may well be right about those nuances he drew. So if that happens and Mamta makes it, then there's no problem. But if in the unlikely event, or seemingly unlikely event of this alliance, the CPIM, the Left Front Congress alliance, or get together making it, I don't know if it'll happen. At the moment, as Swapan says, doesn't look like it. But if it happens, then you'll face a problem where, a coalition government comes onto the agenda, and then I think I don't think you can personalize it between the current and former general secretaries, whatever the nuances in their positions may be. So the question you asked, would that have been possible? I think it would have been no different, because you have a powerful state unit defying or seemingly defying the decision of the Central Committee, and in the Communist Party of India, Marxists, the Central Committee matters a lot. Its decision is final before a party congress. So I think it's an interesting situation that's developing. But I did listen to Swapan carefully.
Right. Right, but Mr. Dasgupta, many would say that, you said that CPM needed perhaps a party like Congress, especially after getting decimated. But many are wondering now, has Congress gained more from this alliance? Because Congress will now, CPM will now be contesting only 140 seats in Bengal as opposed to 210, 215 in the past, whereas Congress will get to contest 90 seats. So in that sense, do you think Congress has gained more from this alliance than the CPM, sir?
You see, the Congress strength in West Bengal is geographically specific and confined to mainly the border districts of northern Bengal. The Congress in southern Bengal and in many of the urban areas, it basically exists as a letterhead because its main support base has been whittled away by the Trinamool. Now, my hunch, and this is, again, there's always a hazard of predicting election results, but my guess is that in this election, the Congress would do far better than it would have done had it fought alone, when it would have been completely decimated. But it will probably not reach the figure of 44 or 46 which they had when they fought in alliance with Mamata Banerjee in 2011. So ultimately, CPM, because of its greater presence, because of its greater organizational rigor, even though somewhat beleaguered, is in a better position to take greater advantage, except in North Bengal. In North Bengal, I believe that this alliance is going to do spectacularly well.
Right. My final question then to Mr. N. Ram, because the election manifesto has just been released, and there clearly, she has raked up a lot of women-centric issues. For instance, she's decided that as far as maternity assistance goes for new mothers, that has been increased from 12,000 to 8,000 rupees. Women to get 50% subsidy on purchase of two-wheelers. I don't know whether two-wheeler companies will agree to that and whether state will be willing to bear that 50% share of this. We don't know exactly how she's going to do that. But these are some of the promises that she has made in this manifesto, and many are saying perhaps this as a reaction to the feeling within the party that she was losing grip over her core women vote bank. How do you interpret, sir, in terms of the election manifesto that has been released just a short while ago?
Yeah, the first thing is that election manifestos in Tamil Nadu are taken fairly seriously by the electorate, because some of these, the low-hanging fruit, it's easy to implement those measures. So election manifestos do matter, and people would be surprised the electorate is not that cynical about these promises. The second thing is you've got to compare it with the DMK manifesto, which is rich in detail because it was based on these interactions, particularly that the Stalin campaign had with people. And if you look at it and compare it, district by district, they have responded to issues. And and if you look at the big picture, the basic promise is development and jobs, not handouts and so on. So there is a contrast to be made there. Yes, I mean, the opinion polls have suggested that the DMK has made a lot of ground in recent weeks and may even be forging ahead. We don't know yet. We don't want to predict that at this point. But the DMK certainly has campaigned exceedingly well, or put up a real contest here, contrary to the earlier speculation that once Vijayakant's party, he moved to the so-called third front, the DMK Congress alliance was weakened. So now it's a very tough fight, and the DMK, I think once a tendency takes shape in Tamil Nadu, usually you can't stop it. And if the polls are right that the DMK now is on the move, is forging ahead, at least in some large parts of the state, then I think that's going to be an interesting contest. But the election manifesto, I think this has just been released. It needs to be closely studied. But looking at it, the face of it, I would say that the emphases are quite different. And the DMK has put its emphasis on development and job creation. It's a huge issue in Tamil Nadu, as probably is in the rest of the country or many other parts of the country. But you have a lot of engineers who are educated, either jobless or not getting the kind of jobs they want. It's a huge issue with the youth. And Stalin often reminds people that 40% of the electorate here is young. And if that is so, I think the DMK is making a pitch for is doing something different than we saw in earlier elections.
Mr. N Ram, Mr. Swapan Dasgupta, thank you so very much for joining us on this election exchange. Of course, we'll have to wait and watch what happens on the 19th of May when the numbers will come out from the state of West Bengal along with other states like Assam and Kerala. 16th of May is when Tamil Nadu goes to polls. Thank you very much for joining us.